continue this journey today as we're in this next part that's called the Exodus. As we do, just a reminder, this is not like looking at Scripture under a microscope, like we're not doing the 5 years in the book of Romans type thing in this sermon series. It's 13 weeks to give us a whole overview, a big picture of the whole Bible. It's kind of like we're looking at the whole forest. We're zoomed out from the 500,000 feet view. We're looking down and we're seeing the forest. And as you're reading, I want to encourage you to write down the leaves that you saw, to talk to others about the leaves that you see, the things that might be really beautiful and really incredible, but we're not going to have a chance to really unpack all of those, unfortunately, as we're looking at it from the whole big picture scope. Today, we're getting into some incredible stories that some of them that the media has done really well with showing. And so one of those would be the Ten Commandments. Charlton Heston, a classic, gives this picture. It gives the backstory of Moses being raised in the house of Pharaoh, that his brother would then be the Pharaoh that would oppose him as he's trying to deliver his people from slavery. It does a great job. It's a great story, great movie. 2 thumbs up. We've got The Prince of Egypt. I haven't seen this one, but we're going to watch it with the kids, I think this week. We're hoping to. It's a classic. Does a great job as well. And then there's a new one, The Promised Land. Lee will not be quiet about it. He loves it. And it's awesome. I've seen some clips of it. I've seen some parts of it. They do a really good job of telling the story of the people in the Exodus. They only get through Exodus in their 6 1-hour-ish episodes. And what it is it's kind of like the Ten Commandments meets The Office, like a docu-series type thing where there's like a video and they're talking. And so you've got some people that don't really exist. Lee's favorite character is this guy who's a fictional character. But the rest of them are, you've got Joshua, Aaron, Moses, Miriam, Moses' wife Zipporah, and then old Korah over there on the far side. It's a great show. Six episodes are up so far, and then they're working on the second season. It's a good place to go to then work on your biblical imagination. They do a good job, like The Chosen, of showing the characters and the humanity of the characters, as well as being true to the Bible where they can, and then adding some color and filling in some gaps there with things that might be plausible, even though there's the fake guy. But apart from that, they do great. And so on page 4 in your study guide, you're going to put the word Exodus on that second line. We've got the beginning there, and then we've got Exodus. As we look at this, we're looking at Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, and we're trying to do all of this in about 30 minutes. Don't worry, we're not going to read through all of it. We're not going to go as in-depth as we can, because we're not going to do an 8-hour church service today. We're going to do a regular time, about 30 minutes of message starting now. No, just kidding. So last week we saw that Adam is created by God, but he sins and defaces God's original design for man. If you're on page 6 here, you can fill in those blanks. But he sins and defaces God's original design for man. And we talked about how it's this idea of you made a mess, but I have a plan. And God has been redeeming things ever since that mistake in the garden. And then he called Abraham, the patriarch, and we looked at the other patriarchs as well, that Abraham is chosen by God to father a people to represent God to the world, and that is going to be the nation of Israel for the Hebrew people. This is God's design, that you will be blessed so that you will be a blessing. God has always had a heart for his people being blessed so that they could bless those around them, so they could say, something's different about you guys. You know God, and now I see that, and I want to get to know him as well. And so as we look at Exodus, there was this transition where Joseph was disliked by his brothers. He was sold into slavery by his brothers, and he said, he didn't exact revenge on them, but he said, hey, actually what you meant for evil, God intended for good, that many people might be saved. And so Joseph didn't just save the Jews. He didn't just save his family. He also saved all the people in Egypt. He saved many countries around that would come there for food. Many lives were saved through Joseph's abilities to interpret dreams. But as years went by, 400 years went by, the new Pharaoh forgot about Joseph and what he had done. And they recognized that the people that were Joseph's relatives were growing, and they were afraid of, if they keep growing out of control, then whenever we get into a war, they're going to join the other side and they're going to just take us over. And so they got nervous, they got anxious. As after Joseph died, the Israelites were fruitful and multiplied greatly, became exceedingly numerous, so the land was filled with them. Then a new king who did not Joseph came to power. So about 400 years go by, and here we are in the Exodus. And I'll read another verse from chapter 1. A new king who did not know about Joseph came to power in Egypt. Look, he said to his people, the Israelites have become too numerous for us. Come, we must deal shrewdly with them, or they will become even more numerous. If war breaks out, they will join our enemies, fight against us, and leave the country. So they put slave masters over them to oppress them with forced labor, and they built Pithom and Ramses as store cities for Pharaoh. So the Egyptians are bringing in the nation of Israel, or the Hebrews, under captivity. They begin to use them as forced labor to actually build some of their great cities and monuments. They're still multiplying. Pharaoh wants to put it to a stop. He's getting anxious. He's getting nervous. And so he does the unthinkable. He calls for any of the Hebrew babies to be killed. And the midwives were incredible. And they said, we're not going to do that. We're not going to put these babies to death. And so Pharaoh's like, we're going to have to start sending soldiers to come and take care of this themselves. And so some crazy family with in an unthinkable situation says, let's just put some pitch on the bottom of a basket. Let's send the baby down the river, and maybe God will protect this baby. And this is the story of Moses, that there was this impossible choice. The baby's born. They're trying to keep it quiet. You guys know how hard that would be if you have a baby that you can't keep quiet, you can't let people know about. So they build a little boat, put it in the Nile, and then we see Pharaoh's daughter shows up. Here's the baby crying, realizes that it's a Hebrew, decides to adopt the baby. She names him Moses. Now Moses, he has this incredible story of being a Hebrew by nationality, but then he'll be raised in Pharaoh's household. And so key figure of the Exodus is Moses. And here's your blanks, everybody, if you're a blank person. Through Moses, and you probably already got these, through Moses, God delivers the Hebrew people from slavery in Egypt and then gives them the law. You might have put promised land there, but it's the law. I tried to get overly ambitious and I missed the blank. It's okay. It's okay if that's you. We see that through Moses, God delivers the Hebrew people from slavery in Egypt. He gives them the law. He's a Hebrew raised in the palace essentially as Egyptian kingship, as essentially as Egyptian nobility. But the origin of his nationality haunts him. He sees people that look like him being mistreated, and he has compassion. He's stirred to help them. As an adult, he goes out to see what's happening. One of the slave masters is beating one of the Hebrews. He intervenes, accidentally kills the guy, buries him in sand. He's in trouble. Now he goes from king or king's son to fugitive, captive, on the run. Everything changed as he went from royalty to murderer and a criminal on the run. He lays aside all the good things in the palace. He just flees. He goes into the desert in Midian. And there he meets a man, marries one of his daughters, Zipporah. They have kids. He's living this nomadic life, raising the sheep for years. Then something incredible happens again. He sees a bush that's burning but yet not consumed. And God tells him, you are going to deliver your people from slavery. The burning bush, this bush that's on fire, it doesn't burn. He goes in closer to investigate. He hears a voice speaking to him, and then he finds out the voice is God. God says, go back to Egypt. Tell Pharaoh to let my people go. He's like, I can't do that. Who am I going to tell? Who would I even tell? Just, would I say the bush that was on fire but didn't burn told me? He has objections, and rightfully so. He's terrified. He doesn't know what to do here. And I love in this story that the compassion of God is on display. That before he's even called, last week we talked about how God keeps his promises. God is hearing the cries of his people from a place of bondage, from a place of slavery. He hears their cries and he moves towards them. It says, during those many days, the king of Egypt died. The people of Israel groaned because of their slavery and cried for help. Their cry for rescue from slavery came up to God, and God heard their groaning and remembered his promise with Abraham, with Isaac, with Jacob. God saw the people of Israel, and God knew. Sometimes we're in a place of suffering, in a place of captivity, and we cry out to God, and we're like, I don't know if God hears me. Well, God hears the cries of his people that are in bondage. He hears the cries of his people that need deliverance, that need rescue. The God who keeps his promises remembered his promise, and he keeps it to rescue his people, to deliver them, to give them land. Verse 7 of chapter 3, then the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt. I have heard their cry because of their taskmasters. I know their sufferings. And I've come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them up out of the land to a good land, a broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey. And Moses is at this place where he doesn't know what to do, where he's feeling really inadequate to the task. And that's a perfect place for him to be. Because all the Hebrews know him as the guy who was raised up by the Egyptians, felt like he was a traitor, like he was an outsider. And then even when he went to intervene, when he saw two Hebrews fighting and arguing with each other, they said, what are you going to do to us? Just kill us like you did the other guy? They knew him as a murderer and as a traitor because he was raised up in the house of the Egyptians. The Egyptians knew him as a murderer, as a killer. And he's going to go back into that place and say, let my people go. But what God is saying is, tell them my name, Yahweh. Tell them Yahweh has sent me. Tell them I am who I am has sent me. I am timeless. I'm the one. And so when Jesus later would say, I am the bread of life, he wasn't killed because he was saying he was bread. He wasn't crucified for feeding the hungry. He was crucified because he was claiming to be God. Moses says, I don't have any power. God says, I'm going to give you supernatural power to show Pharaoh that I'm real. Moses says, I can't speak well. He says, Moses, who made your mouth? Who has made man's mouth? Come on, man. I am who I am is sending you. I made your mouth. Who has made man's mouth? Who makes him mute or deaf or seeing or blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Moses continues to object. And so he says, okay, your brother can do the talking, but you're going to go and do this job. You're going to go and do this work. Take along your brother. He talks pretty well. And so Moses runs out of excuses. He's going to tell Pharaoh, let my people go. As he goes to Pharaoh, it doesn't go well. Pharaoh is stubborn and hard of heart, and he might agree for a second and then change his mind. We see the people are in bondage. They're in slavery. Here's a picture of the Hebrew serving in slavery. And in the midst of that, he goes to Pharaoh. He says, God has sent me. Let my people go. Pharaoh laughs, says no. So what does God do? He has to send the plagues, right? The 10 plagues of Egypt. And in each of these, God is doing something supernatural in nature. We've got a picture of the plagues there. Yeah, there you go. Water turning into blood, frogs, gnats, flies, disease on livestock, boils, hail, and fire, locusts, darkness, and then finally the death of the firstborn. And you would think that maybe after a couple of these, he'd say, you've got a connection to somebody that's a bigger power than me. Maybe I'll just let you go. But his hardness of heart caused him to continually say, no, I need my workers. I need you guys to stay here and be slaves. And each of these plagues was also a direct attack on Egyptian deity. In the polytheistic world of the Egyptians, they worshipped everything from the Nile River to the frogs in the river, cattle, and livestock. The greatest of their deities was Pharaoh himself, who is actually considered himself and considered by those people a god. Each of them is Yahweh going against all the gods of Egypt. And we're so familiar with the stories, we're like, yeah, I've heard it. 10 plagues, got it, we're good. We forget how devastating these things would have been. We forget that these were actual real life stories that have been told and written down so that we could see the power of our God to deliver and rescue his people who are enslaved. As we look at the first 5 plagues, after that, 5 times Moses is saying, if you don't let my people go, worse things are coming. Pharaoh hardens his heart. I will not let this happen. They will stay. Then with the 6th plague going through the 10th plague, it says that God hardened Pharaoh's heart. When 5 of Pharaoh's gods were shot down, and he may have been willing to say, I'm done. But God said, I'm going to put a stubborn streak in your heart, and then we're going to keep this going all the way to the end. And then we see until the point of the Passover. The end, the 10th plague that was the death of the firstborn. When God said to them, the death angel is going to pass over on a certain night. He's going to take the life of every firstborn son as a sacrifice. Unless the blood of a lamb is covering the doorpost, death will come to the firstborn of that family. The death angel comes over. The Hebrews had a way to get out of it, painting the blood of a sacrificed lamb on the doorpost of the house. When the death angel came by and saw the blood, he would pass over those houses. And then that's where the Jewish festival or practice of Passover comes from. They're still celebrating the Passover even to today. All the meals are eaten. Every aspect of that is to celebrate God's deliverance that night. The death angel went throughout the land. The people with blood on their doorpost, their kids survived. Pharaoh's didn't. The unthinkable happened. And then finally, he's in a place where he recognizes that he's not God, and he says, you guys get out of here, leave. So they begin to leave. We're in like Exodus 15 at this point. They're in northern Egypt, up in the land of Goshen, which is up here. We've got a map of that. You can see Goshen up there. Probably not on that picture. Big letters, Goshen there. And then you might expect they'd take the short path up there on the top, but they actually take the longer path, which is on the second picture here. And you'd say, well, they've got a ton of people, like 3 million people are going with them in the Exodus. 600 men who are able to fight, 600,000 men who are able to fight. They're ready for war. Why wouldn't they just take the easy path, the most obvious path, the direct path? And then we see that when Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them on the shorter road through the Philistine country, though that was shorter. That might have taken them 3 to 4 weeks at a steady pace of moving that way. But it's actually going to take them over 40 years to get there. And why the detour? It says in the text, if they face war, God said if they face war, they might change their minds and return to Egypt. And we see in this Exodus the hardness of their heart as well, that they are constantly grumbling. They are constantly complaining. Over 10 times, they're saying, it was better back there in Egypt when we were slaves. We have this tendency too where we say, we're just as stubborn and silly to say, but wasn't it nice back there? Weren't the meals easier? I don't know about this manna stuff. God's provision miraculously each day, day by day. Often for us, we're more comfortable living in the bondage that we know rather than living in the unknown that God has called us to. We'd rather stay there than venture into freedom because the unknown of freedom oftentimes is fraught with possible conflict. The unknown is scarier than the slavery. That sounds so crazy, but that's the lie that the enemy causes us to believe. Bring me back to slavery. At least I've got a meal there. And our food preferences are coming over our freedom. That's crazy. God knows that when they get to the promised land, and they have to fight for it, they might say, we'd rather be slaves than be free men and have to gain our freedom. So he goes on to say, so God led the people around by the desert road toward the Red Sea. The Israelites went up out of Egypt armed for battle. And it's ironic because they're armed for battle. They're ready for battle on the outside, but they're afraid on the inside. And then we have this incredible Red Sea moment. We've got a slide for that. And like the miraculous nature of the Red Sea moment is often lost on us as well, right? Some people say, well, maybe it was the Reed Sea, and that's like 1 foot deep. Okay, that would be actually just as miraculous if they did that, because then all of the army of Pharaoh's people would be drowned in 1 foot of water, right? So it's a miracle either way you look at it, but we're going to trust the Bible is God's word. We already talked about that in week 1, that God would create this highway in the midst of the sea for them to walk right through it. And as they're traveling. They get to the shores of the Red Sea. It's a barrier. And Pharaoh changes his mind. He's like, 10 plagues, no big deal. I'm going to send my army. I'm going to go and get those people back. I'm going to bring them back into slavery. He gets his chariots, his archers. They go chasing them. The nation of Israel is standing there. They're on the edge of the Red Sea. There's no place to go. And at just the right moment, God splits the sea. Before that, the people say to Moses what they would continue to say, something very similar. Did you bring us out here in the desert to die? Moses prays to God. He holds his staff over the water, and God parts the Red Sea. They walk right through it. They're able to travel right through to the other side. When they get to the other side, God brings the water back together on the Egyptian army. Not one of them makes it, Lee. Not even your favorite character, Chisisi. He doesn't make it. That's a reference, I guess. You only know if you watch that show. There's an Egyptian army. All of them die, 100%. None left over. The people see their deliverance. And this moment of God splitting the sea so they could walk through it would be the moment that they look back towards, that they're remembering, the way that we look back towards the cross and we say, we were rescued from our slavery to sin. We were rescued from death, from Jesus' perfect life, death, burial, and resurrection. The way we look back at what Jesus has done for us is how the Hebrew people would look back at this moment of deliverance. They believed God. They believed in Moses. There was this moment of true faith. And then God's going to lead them on a new path. He's going to take them down into the Sinai desert. He's going to lead them to Mount Sinai. And there's this moment of them wandering, of them being in the wilderness, of them starting to grumble again and again and again. Some believe that there's some different scholarly opinions on which route there. We've got some different pictures there. But we have at Sinai, what happens? The law. This is where God gives the commandments. He gives the law to the nation of Israel. God's manifesting himself on the top of the mountain. It's covered with smoke, lightning, loud noises. The mountain shakes when God's presence is above it. They're terrified as God goes and speaks, or as Moses goes and speaks to God face to face. The people say, don't have God speak to us. It's too scary. Just have him talk to you. Don't let him talk to us. Have him talk to you. People often say, why doesn't God just show himself to us? Why doesn't God just show up? We see that this would be terrifying to us if God just showed up in the way that we often pray for. People are knocked face down when they see God. And so Moses goes up by himself onto the mountain, and there he talks with God. Then there's this time period that goes on where there's no word from Moses. God's given Moses the law. He's recording it in stone. He's given them the tablets of stone. And what do the people do? They rebel. Rebels rebel over and over and over again. They say, maybe he's not going to make it. Maybe he's dead up there. It was pretty scary when he went up to the top of the mountain. And it's been a while since he's been up there. And so I'm thinking maybe something happened. So what we need to do is we need to make our own God so that we can worship it instead. Let's make a cow. Put a cow, make it gold. Yeah, we'll worship that. Then we can at least talk to that God, and we won't be afraid of it because we've made it ourselves. We need a leader. We need someone to take us back to Egypt. What if Moses is dead? So they coerce Aaron into making an idol for them to worship that idol. They bring all their stolen jewelry that they took from the Egyptians, pull it together, make a golden image, a calf, begin to worship it. Worship it like pagans do. And then God tells Moses, hey, you need to go down and check on your people. Moses walks down. He sees, and he's been in the presence of the glory of God with his face shining. He comes down and sees his people worshiping this golden calf instead. And in his anger, he takes those stone tablets, he throws them down, and they break, symbolizing how people continually violate or break the law of God. He brings down judgment. He says, hey, we're going to just have to wipe the slate clean, start over. And you see Moses do the unthinkable here. He intercedes for the people, and he says, God, if you do that, the people are going to see and say, well, God wasn't able to rescue them out of this place. God wasn't able to deliver them. And he says, okay, I'll hear your prayers. I'll hear your cry. He brings a plague on them instead. There's judgment. People repent. And now they're going to move forward again, having repented. And then he's able to give them the law after going up on the mountain again. And we see the law is kind of broken up into these three portions. It's not in our Bibles in a way that where there's these three categories. And it's like, here's the moral law. Here's these chapters right here. Here's the civil law. Here's these chapters right here. Here's the ceremonial law and these chapters right here. It's not broken up in a way that really speaks to our Western minds in that way. But it is how we can see the law is given itself. It's given in Exodus, in Leviticus, in Numbers, and Deuteronomy. There's this restatement of the law again and again. Deuteronomy is literally second giving of the law. And we see there's often times where it's confusing. A lot of times if we're doing a Bible reading plan, we get stuck in this section of Exodus, of Numbers and Deuteronomy or Leviticus, is where a lot of us trip up and we say, okay, I'm done reading the Bible in a year. Maybe next time, maybe next year. The first category would be the moral law, like the 10 Commandments. Thou shalt not kill, not steal, don't bear false witness, don't lie. Moral principles. You get that. Everybody gets that. The moral outrage. A lot of civilization is defined based on the moral law. Where did it come from? It came from the Old Testament law. The moral values that most of us hold in a Judeo-Christian world come from here. And then we have the civil law. Property rights, inheritance rights, laws related to marriage, laws related to family, civil punishment for crimes. And then we have things like this ceremonial law, sacrificial system, how to offer sacrifices, the dietary laws for the people, what you can eat to remain ceremonially clean, the priests, the tabernacle, establishing the tabernacle, talk about the festivals that take place during the Jewish calendar. What's cool about this is that the hygiene rules that are in here are hundreds of years ahead of their time, thousands of years in some cases. God is caring for his people by saying, hey, you are to be set apart. You are to be different. Stop playing with corpses. That's weird. And he gives them the ceremonial law so that they can be hygienic, so that they can be clean. He gives them some insight into things that are way ahead of their time because he wants his people to be set apart. He wants them to be different. And he wants them to live so that they can continue to do his will. And so we often get frustrated saying, why is it not just in order, saying here's ceremonial, here's civil, here's moral? Well, God didn't write it just in a way that would be perfect for us to easily understand in this way, but he's given us his word in that time period in a way that would make sense to those minds as well, writing through those people. And so as we read the text, we have to be intentional to think in terms of those groups as we kind of put the law, look at the law, and we gain insight from it. And what's the other purpose for us to have the law? The law, and for New Testament believers, why did he give the law to these Old Testament people? What does it mean for us today? The ultimate purpose of the law, we've got three that you can write down. One, the knowledge of sin. Romans 3:20. Two, to reveal God's righteousness. And three, to ultimately lead us to Jesus. To recognize that this is what sin looks like, so we can be aware of that. In other words, if we didn't know what God's law was, we wouldn't know what was good. And if we didn't know what was good, we wouldn't really know what was bad. Two, it reveals God's righteousness by looking at these commands, the positive things we're supposed to do, the negative things we're supposed to avoid. It gives us a glimpse of God. It reveals that God is incredibly holy. He's not to be taken lightly. He's not to be trivialized. And three, Galatians 3:24 and 25 says the law actually leads us to Jesus. As we understand the law, we understand that none of it is by good works could ever keep it. And so the Old Testament person had a sacrifice every year to pay for his sins that he had committed. We have a sacrifice too, Jesus Christ, a once-for-all sacrifice that allows us to come to our God with confidence that all of our past, present, and future sins have been taken care of. He's given us a way to live righteous by grace through faith, to walk by his Spirit in the new life that he's given us. And so then they leave Mount Sinai, they travel up to Kadesh Barnea, and then there's this rebellion yet again. They get to Kadesh Barnea. They're ready to go in, but they rebel yet again. They've got their tabernacle. They've got their law. They've got their leader. They have all these incredible experiences of God's power. You would think that they were ready for battle. You would think that they're ready to believe. They send 12 spies in to see the land. 10 of them come back terrified, saying, there's no way that we could possibly beat these guys. There's giants. But then Caleb and Joshua, they said, we've seen God split the Red Sea so we could walk right through it. This is nothing for our God. This is the land flowing with milk and honey. And this is the land where you could get a bushel of grapes and you would need 2 people to carry it. It's incredible how amazing this land is that God has promised us. Yeah, we can do God's will. Let's walk right in. And the people listened to the 10 scared spies. And they were foolish to say, we got to take Moses and Aaron out. We got to get rid of those guys because obviously this isn't going well. And so because of that rebellion, they would continue to wander for 40 years, and none of the adults then would see the promised land because of the judgment for their rebellion. And it's not just that one rebellion. There's like 10 separate instances of them saying, did you just take us out of here so that we would die? They were continually rebellious leading up to this. And so they didn't get to see the promised land. And so we have 40 years of wandering, consequences of rebelling against God at Kadesh Barnea. They're in the desert for 40 years. We've got some picture of that. Every male 20 years older and older dies. The desert literally becomes the burial place for these people as they wander. And then we see the end of Moses' life, and he's not going to be able to enter the promised land either. God says, hey, Moses, you brought us here, but you're not going to take us in. Because of your sin, there's consequences for that. You're not going to be able to see the promised land either yourself. And you'd be like, man, Moses, he was pretty good. He did pretty well most of the time. He got frustrated a few times. Hit a rock with his staff, trying to take things into his own hand and show the people that were rebellious continually. And God says, no, you're not going to be able to take them into the promised land. It proves again, Adam can't do it. Abraham can't do it. Moses cannot do it. We need one without sin. We need Jesus Christ to come, to live the perfect life that we could never live, to die the death on the cross that we deserve, to raise from the dead so that anyone who would call upon his name would have the right to become a child of God. And the hero of the story of the Bible will come when Jesus Christ arrives, the once for all Passover lamb, who would live that perfect life, who would call us to be his people. Moses gets to see the promised land. He's the greatest prophet of the Old Testament. The man is revered by literally billions of people on the planet today. He looks over, he sees Canaan, he sees it with his own eyes, and then God takes him. He takes his life, he doesn't lead the people in. And so as we look at this, you might be saying, okay, well, talk to me about the significance. Why does this matter, James? We've got 4 points to hit here on the significance piece. 1, we need God's deliverance. That's why we have regeneration, recovery ministry. We say we all need deliverance. We need to be rescued because of our sin. We don't have an oppressor of Egypt saying we're going to have to make twice as many bricks with just as many ingredients or half the ingredients. But we have sin and death looming over us, making it impossible for us to live the abundant life that Jesus wants us to live. We need deliverance. 2, we need to recognize that our good deeds will always fall short. Like because of our sin, we can't come in. Because of their sin, they couldn't enter the promised land. Our good deeds will always fall short. The Old Testament law shows us that. The moral standards that we could never live up to. Something had to die because the wages of sin is death. 3, blessed people still rebel. Like we might see the people and we say, man, they're so dumb. They're so stubborn. They're so foolish. But then you're like, wait, but that's me. Like I am forgetful and foolish, and I rebel against a holy and perfect God because I forget that in the moment, and sin looks sweeter. Blessed people still rebel. How many times do you have to see the glory of God before you quit having a rebellious streak? One more, maybe? Except that we can't keep it on our own. 10 plagues, parting the Red Sea, manna from heaven, still not enough. When will they learn? But we're the exact same way. We say, well, if I would just have more money, if you would just fix some things for me, God, then I would stop rebelling. If my kids would just listen. If I could get the girl or get the guy. If my boss would treat me a little better, then I would just be perfectly obedient, God. If my health got better, then I would be obedient. But we're the same way. Blessed people still rebel. And we're thankful for the grace that we have. But here's the fourth one, and it's hard for us to stomach sometimes, that we have consequences of sin this side of the promised land. Just like the rebels that didn't get to go into the promised land, just like Moses himself, who you'd be like, man, this is like the deliverer. He's your messenger, God. What were you doing? There are consequences of sin on this side of the promised land. People who put their trust in Jesus are promised heaven, and you will inherit it. The same way that the nation of Israel was promised the promised land, and they will get there eventually. You won't get there. You will get there if you're trusting him. That doesn't mean that you won't have consequences of your sin on this side of heaven. Like I can't plead the blood of Jesus over my traffic ticket and get it to go away. Right? There are consequences for our sin on this side of the promised land. God is gracious and loving and merciful, but the Bible makes it clear that there are consequences for immoral, hurtful, damaging things that we do here. Like it grieves God's heart because it hurts his people that he loves. God has forgiven us, and our place in heaven is secure if we put our faith in Jesus Christ. Like, don't get that twisted. But there are consequences for our sin that we still experience here. And that means that we shouldn't give in to sin. We don't have license to sin, because if you do, you're going to reap the consequences of those things here. Sin leads to death and destruction in this life. And so my encouragement, church, is throughout this next week, you could watch a movie, you could watch a TV series, that's cool, or you could open God's word and say, speak to me. Would you speak to me through your word, through Exodus and Numbers and Leviticus and Deuteronomy? Would you speak to me in my heart? And as you do, you'll get a picture of God's holiness and how jealous he is for his people. You'll get a picture of how he wants us to be holy and set apart. You'll be overwhelmed by how much is there. And you'll get a picture of God's graciousness, and you'll get a picture of his salvation.